You're about to hear a story about a woman who disappeared on what seemed like a regular Tuesday morning. The search that followed shocked everyone in town. This story is full of unexpected twists, strange discoveries, and a lot of things that just don't make sense. Let's get into it. On October 16, 2012, 21-year-old Whitney Heichel kissed her husband Clint goodbye, hopped into her car, and left for work. Simple enough, right? But by 7:30 a.m., when she didn't show up to work, her coworkers started texting her. By 8 a.m., Clint had started calling. No answer. Now, this wasn't like Whitney. She was always on time, always dependable. So when Clint still hadn't heard from her by 10 a.m., he knew something was wrong. Whitney had vanished without a trace. But where did she go? Clint didn't waste any time. As soon as he realized Whitney was missing, he called the police. A missing person case was opened up, and immediately, the search began. Law enforcement started checking all the places Whitney would usually be: her coffee shop, her apartment complex, the routes she'd take to work. It felt like a routine search at first, but as hours ticked by and there was still no sign of Whitney, the worry started to settle in. By 9 a.m., Clint was frantic. Every time he tried calling, the phone just rang and rang. No one had seen her, and nobody knew where she had gone. She wasn't the type to just disappear, let alone go off the grid without telling anyone. It was like she had vanished into thin air. But where could she have gone? And why hadn't anyone heard from her? Then, several hours into the search, a break came from an unlikely place: a gas station in a nearby town called Troutdale. It was a small clue, but it was a start. Security footage from that gas station revealed something that made everyone's stomach drop. There, sitting at the pump, was Whitney's car, but Whitney wasn't driving it. Instead, a man was behind the wheel. And Whitney? She was sitting in the passenger seat, but something was off. She didn't look like herself. Her head was tilted slightly, and she didn't appear alert. It was as if she was barely conscious, or maybe even unconscious. The footage was grainy, but it was clear enough to make the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. Whitney, who was always so in control, so dependable, was sitting there like a passenger in her own life. And the man? He looked calm, completely in control of the situation. But the question lingered in the air. Who was this guy? Why was he with Whitney? The footage didn't end there. The man used Whitney's debit card to pay for gas. And here's the thing: Whitney never let anyone drive her car, and she definitely wouldn't hand over her debit card to just anyone. So, what was going on? Who was this man? And why was he using her card? The unanswered questions piled up, each one stranger than the last. No one knew this man. No one recognized him. And now, with this footage, it was clear. Something was happening that no one could explain. Clint didn't waste any time. As soon as he realized Whitney was missing, he called the police. A missing person case was opened up, and immediately, the search began. Law enforcement started checking all the places Whitney would usually be: her coffee shop, her apartment complex, the routes she'd take to work. It felt like a routine search at first, but as hours ticked by and there was still no sign of Whitney, the worry started to settle in. By 9 a.m., Clint was frantic. Every time he tried calling, the phone just rang and rang. No one had seen her, and nobody knew where she had gone. She wasn't the type to just disappear, let alone go off the grid without telling anyone. It was like she had vanished into thin air. But where could she have gone? And why hadn't anyone heard from her? Then, several hours into the search, a break came from an unlikely place: a gas station in a nearby town called Troutdale. It was a small clue, but it was a start. Security footage from that gas station revealed something that made everyone's stomach drop. There, sitting at the pump, was Whitney's car, but Whitney wasn't driving it. Instead, a man was behind the wheel. And Whitney? She was sitting in the passenger seat, but something was off. She didn't look like herself. Her head was tilted slightly, and she didn't appear alert. It was as if she was barely conscious, or maybe even unconscious. The footage was grainy, but it was clear enough to make the hairs on the back of your neck stand up. Whitney, who was always so in control, so dependable, was sitting there like a passenger in her own life. And the man? He looked calm, completely in control of the situation. But the question lingered in the air. Who was this guy? Why was he with Whitney? The footage didn't end there. The man used Whitney's debit card to pay for gas. And here's the thing, Whitney never let anyone drive her car, and she definitely wouldn't hand over her debit card to just anyone. So, what was going on? Who was this man? And why was he using her card? The unanswered questions piled up, each one stranger than the last. No one knew this man. No one recognized him. And now, with this footage, it was clear. Something was happening that no one could explain. Then, just when the investigation seemed to have stalled, a huge discovery came completely out of nowhere. A hiker, simply out for a routine walk on Larch Mountain, stumbled upon something unexpected, a bright pink sippy cup lying alone in the woods. The cup, so out of place in the quiet, secluded forest, seemed almost like it had been dropped by accident. At first, it didn't seem like much. After all, kids play in parks, drop things, and sometimes leave behind toys. But the hiker couldn't shake the feeling that this was something more than just an abandoned object. The cup didn't belong to Whitney. It wasn't even hers. It belonged to her niece, a child's cup. It was a detail that stuck out like a sore thumb. And what made it even stranger was that just days before, that very same cup had been seen in the back seat of Whitney's car. It had been sitting there, right where it had always been. So how in the world did it end up out there, in the middle of a thick, dense forest, miles away from where Whitney lived? The question started immediately. Was it possible that Whitney had been near the forest, maybe even taken there against her will? Or was it just a coincidence, some random object left behind? Investigators couldn't stop thinking about it. The cup felt like it was trying to tell them something, but they couldn't figure out what. They looked at the cup, still untouched by the weather, sitting among the trees, almost like it had been placed there intentionally. Who put it there? Was this a sign that Whitney had been close? Was she brought out to Larch Mountain for a reason? Or was it a piece of the puzzle left behind on purpose by someone else? As the questions piled up, the situation began to feel more like a nightmare than a simple missing person case. Whitney had vanished without a trace, and now this cup was adding a whole new layer of mystery. The more they thought about it, the more bizarre it seemed. How had it gotten out there? Could this mean that someone else had been involved? Or was it a sign that Whitney herself had been near the forest? Was this really just a chance discovery? Or had someone left the cup to mislead investigators? The discovery opened up a floodgate of possibilities. The timeline that had once seemed so straightforward now seemed full of gaps. What had happened to Whitney in the days leading up to her disappearance? Why hadn't they found any sign of her in the woods before? Why now, just after this strange, random discovery? The cup raised new doubts and questions that no one could answer, and that was just the beginning. As the investigators followed this new lead, things took a darker turn. What had once been an open and shut case, a woman missing under mysterious circumstances, was now spiraling into something far more complicated. The cup wasn't just a random object, it was a clue that led to other discoveries, each one stranger than the last. It wasn't just about a missing woman anymore, it was about something much more sinister. And as the investigation deepened, one thing became clear. They were getting closer to something they were not prepared for. Later that afternoon, another strange twist came when Whitney's car was discovered, abandoned. It wasn't where anyone expected to find it. It wasn't parked near her apartment or in any of the areas she frequented. Instead, it was sitting alone in a shopping center parking lot not far from Larch Mountain. It felt so out of place, almost like it had been dropped there on purpose. The discovery was a shock, but at the same time, it felt like the missing piece to a puzzle they had been working on. Yet, everything about the car felt wrong. As investigators approached the car, it immediately became clear that this wasn't just an abandoned vehicle. It was a car in distress. The windows were shattered, not a simple crack, but completely smashed. The back seat was a mess, papers and belongings strewn about as if someone had been searching through it in a hurry. The tires were covered in fresh mud, the kind of mud that wasn't from an overnight rain. It looked as though the car had been driven through a muddy off-road trail, completely out of character for Whitney. She was meticulous about her belongings. Her car was always neat. This wasn't like her. The car told a story, but it was one no one was ready to hear. The more they examined it, the more unsettling it became. Whoever had been in that car didn't care about leaving a trail. There were no attempts to hide the damage or clean up the mess. Why was Whitney's car abandoned like this, in such a careless state? And where was she? There were no signs of struggle nearby, no blood or obvious clues, just the car left behind in a parking lot. It was as if whoever was involved wanted the car to be found. But why? This discovery raised more questions than answers. Was it possible that Whitney had been inside the car and something had happened to her while she was there? The mud on the tires suggested the car had been taken off the road, yet there was no sign of Whitney nearby. The more investigators thought about it, the more it didn't make sense. This wasn't just a case of a missing person. Whitney didn't just disappear and leave her car behind in this way. There was something darker at play. As the pieces began to fall into place, the investigators started to question everything they thought they knew about Whitney's disappearance. The neatness of her car, the state it was found in now, it all suggested a much bigger story. Was the car a clue, or was it something designed to mislead them? Could the mud on the tires mean that Whitney had been forced off the road? The team realized that this case wasn't just about a woman who had gone missing. It was becoming something far more complex, something more sinister. The discovery of the car wasn't just another lead. It was the beginning of a shift in the investigation. With each new detail, the case grew darker. Whitney wasn't just missing. Something had happened to her. But the questions is what happened that day. Why was her car abandoned like this? What had truly gone wrong? With each new discovery, the search became more urgent, and the mystery only deepened. As the days wore on and the search for Whitney grew more desperate, one small breakthrough came from a place no one expected. A waitress, working a shift at a local diner, remembered something that would stop investigators in their tracks. Just a few days before Whitney disappeared, the waitress had seen her at the diner. But she wasn't alone. She was sitting with a man. The pair had been laughing, talking like old friends. There was a sense of comfort between them, like they'd known each other for years. But what caught the waitress's attention wasn't just that they were together, it was the way they interacted. The man didn't seem out of place, and yet, there was something about him that stood out. He wasn't a complete stranger. He was someone Whitney was familiar with. But who was he? The waitress recalled how the man didn't order anything. He didn't seem like he was there to eat or even to engage in casual conversation. Instead, he just sat there, watching Whitney. That was the odd part. He wasn't contributing much to the conversation. He was just observing her, almost like he was studying her. It felt strange, and the waitress couldn't shake the feeling that something about this man wasn't quite right. As the waitress shared her recollection, the mystery thickened. Whitney had been at ease, laughing and chatting, but the man's silence, his stillness, left the waitress with a lingering sense of discomfort. Why would he be there, with Whitney, not speaking much? What was his role in her life? And more pressing, why hadn't Whitney mentioned him before? The questions piled up. Who was this man? Was he someone Whitney had known for a while, or had she just met him? His familiarity with her suggested a deeper connection, but the way he behaved made everything feel unsettling. Why was he just sitting there, watching her, doing nothing but observing? And why hadn't Whitney mentioned him to anyone else? This moment, a small piece of the puzzle, only added to the confusion. The more the investigators thought about it, the more the mystery surrounding this man grew. Was he someone Whitney had trusted? Or was he someone new who had slipped into her life unnoticed? The waitress's memory had opened a new door, one that led them straight into more questions and no answers. With the man still unidentified, it seemed the deeper they dug, the more tangled the case became. Just when the investigation seemed to be stalling, a breakthrough came in a way no one expected. The investigators got access to Whitney's car's GPS data. At first, they were hoping it would give them a clearer idea of her whereabouts, perhaps helping them track her movements before she disappeared. But what they found was far more chilling than anyone could have anticipated. The GPS data revealed something unsettling. After Whitney's stop at the gas station, the car didn't head back in the direction it was supposed to. Instead, it took an unexpected turn, veering off the usual route. The car had gone deep into the woods, and it didn't stop there. It continued on, well off the beaten path. This wasn't just a random detour, this was something calculated. Someone, it seemed, had deliberately taken Whitney into the wilderness, away from the main roads, into the heart of nowhere. The route was so far from the typical paths Whitney would have taken, it was impossible not to question why it had happened. Why would she leave her usual route behind and go so deep into the woods? The investigators knew something was off. This wasn't a simple case of a car malfunctioning or taking an accidental wrong turn. This was a deliberate choice. But who was driving? The more they analyzed the data, the clearer it became. Whoever was driving Whitney's car knew exactly where they were going. This wasn't a random choice. Whoever was behind the wheel had a plan, and it wasn't to take the car to familiar places. Instead, they had chosen a route that led deep into the forest, a place far removed from Whitney's usual routine. The car didn't follow the expected path home, and that, more than anything, raised the stakes in this already bizarre case. The more they thought about it, the more questions flooded in. Why would the driver take Whitney into such a remote area? Was this part of some larger plan? Or was it something more sinister? Whoever had been driving was intentional, and that made everything feel more chilling. Whitney wasn't just missing. Something had happened to her, and whoever was behind this, they knew exactly what they were doing. Each discovery about the car's route only deepened the mystery. The investigators were no longer just looking for a missing woman. They were looking for answers to a question that felt far too dangerous to answer. Someone had taken Whitney into the woods. But why? And where was she now? The more they pieced together, the more they realized this wasn't just an ordinary case of a missing person. It was something far darker. The GPS data wasn't just a clue. It was a map to a place they hadn't yet found, leading them further into the unknown. The investigation into Whitney Heichel's tragic death seemed to be at a standstill for a time, but everything changed when Jonathan Holt admitted to killing her. After being questioned, Holt provided details of what happened on October 16th. He told police that he asked Whitney for a ride, and once she agreed, he pulled a gun on her and forced her to drive to Rosen Lake. There, he sexually assaulted her, shot her, and then drove her body to Larch Mountain, where it was later discovered. The investigation gained momentum when Holt's DNA was found on the steering wheel of Whitney's car, and he also admitted to throwing his cell phone into the lake after killing her. His phone was later found there. The autopsy confirmed that Whitney had been shot 4 times. With this admission, and the evidence to back it up, there was no doubt about who was responsible for her tragic death. The news left everyone in the community shocked. Whitney's family, particularly her husband Clint, received overwhelming support from local businesses and the people who knew Whitney. Dutch Bros Coffee and Starbucks donated a portion of their proceeds to the Heichel family, while those who had known Whitney spoke of her warmth, kindness, and how much she was loved by all who knew her. The Jehovah's Witness congregation distanced itself from Holt, clarifying that he was not an active member of their church. As the details of the case came to light, it was hard for everyone to understand how someone who appeared so ordinary could commit such a horrific crime. Jonathan Holt now faces 7 counts of aggravated murder, and his trial is yet to come. His defense may highlight his clean criminal record prior to this event, but the facts of the case are clear. Holt took Whitney's life in a brutal, calculated way. Clint Heichel and Whitney's family have expressed their hope for justice and that Holt will be held accountable for his actions. While the trial is still to unfold, the core details of the case are undeniable. This is no longer a missing person case. Jonathan Holt murdered Whitney. The entire community is grappling with the painful truth of what happened, and justice is on the horizon. Now that the truth is revealed, Jonathan Holt is undeniably the person responsible for Whitney's death. His confession, along with the DNA evidence and the recovery of his phone, has made everything clear. While this brings closure to the investigation, the loss of Whitney is something that will be felt forever by her family and the community. The mystery of what happened to her has been solved, but the grief and hurt remain. Whitney's memory will live on in the hearts of all who knew her, and her family can now begin to heal, knowing that the truth is out. Thank you for following the case with us. With everything now revealed, we can finally understand what happened to Whitney and give her family the support they need. Jonathan Holt has confessed to the crime, but there's still a lot of pain to heal. If you have any thoughts, questions, or reactions, feel free to leave them in the comments. Your voice matters in helping us make sense of this tragedy. And if you want to stay updated on the case as it moves through the legal system, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. We'll continue to keep you informed as the legal process unfolds.